Hello and welcome to Who Dares Rolls TV. I am your host, Mike B, and this is Who Dares Rolls TV. So, today we're going to be doing a review of Nemesis. Yes, Nemesis, which is from Awaken Realms. It is their ode to aliens, surviving on a starship in space, and lots of horrible things happening. Nemesis is can be played solo, or it is up to 5 players can play it. It's cooperative or semi-cooperative, whatever takes your mood. Semi-cooperative is the more fun area, if you ask me, because it adds an element of traitor mechanisms in there. People have their own agendas. It's kind of a nice touch, but if that's not for you, you can play a full co-op mode. There is player elimination, depending on how you come down on that. So all of that sort of stuff going on. So quick thematic overview of what Nemesis is. Essentially, Nemesis is kind of alien, with a bit of aliens in space, rather than not in space. So the idea is the crew awaken on the ship Nemesis from their hypersleep chambers, only to find one of their number has come to a sticky end, and there's killing vicious, monstrous biomechanical life forms loosed on your ship, as is always the way. Terribly annoying. And then the idea is essentially to sneak around the confines of the ship, making sure that it is in fact flying to the right destination, and that all the engines are working. So that's it. That's the main goals. You will have to complete your own secret objective, but also to be able to complete your secret objective, you need to make sure the ship actually makes it to Earth. So there's 3 engines on the ship. At least 2 of them need to be running at the end of the game for you to successfully survive the game. Also, there's a bridge and a navig computer, and you need to check that the ship is actually flying to Earth rather than disappearing off into the wild blue yonder. So those are things that everyone cooperatively needs to kind of make is working in their best interest. And then after you've done all that, you have to jump yourself back in your hypersleep chamber and have a little snooze before you get to your destination and find out if you won or not. However, all very easy, I'm sure. As I said, there is separate objectives. Every player has 2 at the start of the game, and they will often revolve around stuff that is essentially going to be against the common goal of everyone else. It may be that you have to see one specific player perish and not survive. It may be that you don't see any of enough people surviving and getting to the ship. You may have to find out alien samples. You may in fact have to change the ship's direction and fly somewhere else entirely differently for you to win. It's a nice touch. It's a nice thematic-y touch. It adds just enough edge of paranoia to the main game, which is fun. I like that there is that going on. Gameplay itself is actually relatively straightforward. Essentially, all players have their randomized characters to start the game. You will select by a set of cards, will tell you play order you play in, and a selection of cards that you'll be drawn to pick your characters. All the characters play mostly the same. What they do is they all come with their own individual decks, and in those decks there will be some cards that relate specifically to that character. So the engineer will have cards that allow them to fix stuff more easily, or do one of the things as a scout potentially allows them to sneak around the ship a bit easier. Ship's captain maybe have some abilities that allow them to sort of cooperate more, have more control over the teams around them. So there's that little setup. Aside from that, everything else is played out with this deck of cards. Now there's a bunch of basic actions which are moving, fighting, picking items up, trading, or even crafting things, and they're all done with essentially a card cost relating to them. Every basic action will cost you a discard of a card to be able to do stuff, which is a nice touch, because essentially you always have a 5 cards hand, and then it's a case of you're having to make some decisions there. What cards you're holding back, what cards are you're essentially going to trash to be able to do these other moves. Some of the cards themselves have a card cost on them, maybe even 2 card costs, which will require you to discard cards that use them and do their special abilities. And as you explore the board on the ship, you will uncover more rooms, which also have costs relating to them of cards you'll discard to activate or use those rooms. Anything from surgeries to security terminals, armories, cafes, all sorts of interesting things. So there's all that going on the game. So all that's on each player's player board, and you've got the basic actions on there. Now, one of the main action, which is going to have a lot of sway over as you play the game, is the move action. Whenever you use a move action, is you discard a card, and then you can move from one room into a neighbouring room down a corridor. If you're moving into a room where there is no other soul in there, at the very start of the game, none of the rooms are explored, you will flip the room tiles over, flip an exploration token over, and that it will tell you the situation in the room, what items are in there to be collected, searched for, and maybe if it's broken or it's on fire or some other horrible thing has occurred. But most importantly, every move into an area unoccupied will result in you rolling a noise dice. When you roll the noise dice, any number on there will relate to one of the corridors stretching off the room where you put noise tokens into. If ever a noise token goes down to an area already existing noise token is there, then it causes an encounter to occur. One of the intruders, or as I like to call them, horrible fucking giant huge killer xenomorph creatures will appear and probably eat your face off. And that's pretty much how the game works. It's essentially everyone keeps playing their turns. You've got your 5 cards. Once people have tapped out, passed during that round, the end of that player round ends. You go to an event stage where the creatures move around the ship. Essentially, if they can attack people, fires may spread. Event cards are drawn, which nearly always result in horrible stuff happening to the crew. And then a really nice touch is there's this intruder development, bag development. So in this bag is some cardboard chits, which they relate to, that one doesn't, it's a blank, but they relate to the aliens on the board. And whenever you encounter an alien, you pull one of these out here, and it will work out if you've got more cards in your hand than that token there, then you can avoid surprise attacks. But more importantly, at the end of each round, they're pulled out, and depending what counter is pulled out, that will have an effect either on what's in the bag or what happens to the characters on the board. So there's this constant sort of evolving threat of stuff going in and out of this bag. And depending, it could be bad. Some things can morph into other creatures which go into the bag. They can cause the players to make noise rolls. All sorts of interesting sort of variables to that. And that's a nice touch. That's essentially it. We keep playing around until the timer runs out. Once the timer runs out, the ship will jump into hyperdrive, at which point in time the engines need to be working, the direction needs to be set, everyone needs to be in their hibernation couch. Anyone left wandering the aisles of the ship, bumbling around, will be turned to pate. And then we find out by looking at your hidden objectives who's completed the hidden objective, and if they've completed it, essentially they've won, if they've not succumbed to contamination. Ah yes, because there's another thing. Throughout the game, as you're attacked by the life form, the creatures, I shouldn't say life form, by the intruders, as the game refers to them as you're attacked by them, you can essentially take on cards, these infection cards, and they go into your deck. What they really do is play no further part in that deck other than just junk. You can't use them to spend to do actions. They are just there just to fill up your hand and basically mean you can't do stuff with them in there. But the worst thing of them is I've got this sort of weird color coding thing going on. You can't read the card, you can't see what it says on it without scanning it and by potting it into this rather funky red lens. It's like I think as a kid I remember these on comic books and stuff, where you put the red lens at the top and you can read the text like a secret decoder ring. So you can perform a scan action in certain rooms with cards in your hand to scan your cards to see if you're infected. Which is not really good generally. If you're infected, there's a very high probability at some point you're basically going to turn into a killing machine yourself, or just die, or a combination of the two. So that's also something to bear in mind. And also potentially, with a large number of them in your deck, at the very end of the game, there is a test where you shuffle your cards and draw 4 out, and if you pull a infected card out, then despite all the trials and tribulations you've gone through up until that point in time, you will succumb to the alien infection. A very severe case of intergalactic athlete's foot. So that is it. I think that's roughly as an overview. That's kind of how the game works. It is, once you've played it and once you're rolling with it, it's very straightforward. It's very easy to get your heads over, and it whips along at a fair rate of knots. Most games of 3 to 4 players will still run you into about 2 to 3 hours of an evening easily, even if it's whipping along. But it's such a richly kind of thematic game. You're kind of drawn into this environment, this thing, and it's got that sort of level of, oh no, down the dark creepy corridors, and of course members of your team are clumping around putting noise tokens liberally everywhere, which is essentially just priming the board for the carnage to come. And just general, of course, you've got this whole level of uncertainty. Is everyone playing above the board? what's going on, and it is a nice touch that probably for about 2/3 of the game everyone is mostly playing quite nicely, and then as the timer crunches down and as it's getting close to the final moments of the game, that's when the gloves tend to come off, and you'll find out what people's true colours are when people get shoved out into airlocks or barricaded in rooms or all manner of unarmed pleasantries. Okay, so I mean, Nemesis, I mean, it's got the bling factor. You've got these rather cool sort of minis in the game, which they are pretty cool sculpts, to be fair, very sort of just shy of HR Giga copyright, but yeah, they're standard sort of xenomorph type creatures, kind of cool looking things. All the sculpts, all the minis are pretty nice and well put together. Board is quite dark, but then it's kind of supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be the dark corridors of the ship, but it all works well functionality wise. The graphic design is really nice. The iconography is really simple to understand once you understand how that works. I think it kind of works really well, and it's actually a really slickly put together design. And I had misgivings because I'd not backed Nemesis when it first was available, because I didn't really have the cash at the time, and I was kind of heart set on Lifeform, but having now got it, I must admit I'd heard a lot of hearsay and kerfuffle that it was a very overlong game, there's lots of downtime, and I don't really feel it. It runs fairly smoothly. There's not a massive amount of downtime. Only each player has 2 actions to take, and there is only a finite amount of stuff you can do in those 2 actions. And more importantly, watching what those players do as a observer sat across the table, is you're always interested in where they're going and what they're doing, and it's got that cooperative aspect to it, that you're going, oh, why are you going that way? Why are you doing that? With this underlying kind of concern regarding the semi-cooperative nature of the game. So yeah, that's all kind of cool. Aesthetically, it's really good. The graphic design is nice, card quality, all of the cards, nice finish on them. Everything looks good. The rulebook is even pretty good. It's quite well laid out with a decent index on there, and you can find stuff pretty quickly if you've got any questions. But I'll be clear, once you've probably played a game of this, it's not much else to pick up. You can then get playing with it. There is dice in it. We love a bit of dice rolling. The noise mechanism is a really cool touch. Combat is again dice based. We're using ammo, and you get that desperate feel as you're running out of ammo fighting these things. I mean, it's not a run and gun game. Whilst it is definitely more combat orientated than Lifeform, it's a game essentially still is, you're not really going to be doing massive firefights. It can happen, but ammo's light on the ground, so you'll always, more of the cases, you're legging it rather than standing your ground and popping shots off. There will be moments of that, and it tells a really cool story. I mean, that's the cool. It's a thematic game, and it is telling that desperate sort of story of these Marines or a crew fighting against these odds, trying to survive, trying to get the ship working, trying to get in there. So all that is kind of cool. It's got that alien-ish vibe to it, although it, as I say, it feels more aliens than alien. But on the whole, it's really good fun. Really enjoyed it. It's one I've played a couple of times in a row, last couple of nights, just to really get a feel of it. And it plays really smoothly. And it is, I love the semi-co-op nature of it. There is player elimination, we said. So the first player to die has the option to come back as an alien, to control the creatures, the intruders. And from what I've looked at, that's pretty much game over for everyone else once they do that. Although usually the death of characters usually doesn't come until a later stage of the game. So it's only within the last 3 or 4 turns of the game is likelihood of people are going to die. At which point in time is they can kind of just sit back and enjoy the show. The co-op rules have an option there for reviving players if you want. So I mean, there's no reason why you can't chuck that into your game if you want to. But I quite like the permanency of you're dead. Likewise, if you launch yourself on a shuttle escape pod or you go into hibernation, you're out of the game at that point in time. Which, as people drop out of the game, it speeds up the turn process anyway because there's less people playing, so the game kind of auto corrects. So I didn't have an issue with that, but I mean, there is some people that potentially will. And yeah, so that's it. It plays nicely. It plays really sharp. It's really simple to teach. And once, as I say, you're going, that idea, that mechanism of the card play, burning cards, spinning cards to do actions or use other cards, is a nice touch. And I think with a semi-cooperative thing, is that it works all really nicely together. The only thing is probably the infection deck, the infected cards, they're kind of cool. I like the idea of the infection cards. I like that you have to scan them. That's all kind of cool, but it doesn't really It's one mechanism, one thing that doesn't really have any bearing other than on you. Having a player with you infected isn't really going to ruin your day very much, aside from if they potentially succumb to the infection and then turn into a creature. That's about the only real, from my plays of it, that I've seen. It would be kind of cool if there was potentially a further problem with that infection spreading. Now, I've not played for all the event cards, I don't think, so potentially there is maybe something in there, but of all the games I've played of it so far, it's not been an issue other than isolated to the character or the player that is infected. It's kind of cool, it's got that thingish quality to it, but it is, I don't know, I suppose it's another impairment to you winning the game, rather than it being a problem as a wider scope for everyone else. So they're kind of cool, but it's the one bit of it that kind of is probably like, yeah, it's a problem for the person rather than anyone else. It's just kind of stacking it again against the odds of you actually winning the game. I do like the semi-co-op nature of it, and as I said, it's what is really cool, especially if you play with a bunch of complete tossers, is that whole, at some point it's all going to kick off, and people will start doing unpleasant things to them, and it's quite nice. I like semi-co-op games anyway. I like this hidden traitor games. The fact that potentially everyone's a hidden traitor is quite a nice touch, and you get that kind of desperate feel as you would in some of these movies where you watch, where it's suddenly every man for himself, where you've got, all common decency's gone out the window, all humanity and civility's gone, and people are scrabbling to look after their own best interests, and that's when people are dying and getting trapped in rooms, and there's this whole sort of screw you business. I mean, if you're not a fan of that style of gameplay, Nemesis is kind of all about that, and if you could buy into that sort of the universe the game is portraying and that sort of mentality, then you're in for a riot. If it's not for you, then it's probably not for you. And actually, as I say, after a play, very easy to pick up, teach, and play the game through, which is cool. I like the game, the fact that there isn't this huge, massive learning curve every time. Once you know what you're doing, you can teach it easily. People can pick it up easy. You can just get on to enjoying the game. And with that cooperative level to it, you can kind of ease other people, new players, in to the game quite easily. Just give them the basic rules, and then as stuff opens up on the board, then you can sort of tweak some more. Lots of variety in there. I mean, there is different room tiles that are going to come out. So some of the rooms, the room twos, which are central to the board, there's different sets of them, so you're not always guaranteed the same of those tiles out every game. There's a reverse side of the player board, which has a harder version of the ship. So there's a variety there, a bunch of characters to play with as well. So there's variety there. I think there's about 6 characters, or even more, 7, 8, I don't know. So there's that variety of play styles there, with just a tweak to each one of them. So they've all got just a slight difference. It would have been kind of cool if you could kind of do more with your characters, maybe add more cards in there to give them more abilities, or adapt them as they went for the game. But it is that. I know there's the Kickstarter and Kickstarter expansions, so we may see some of that stuff coming to retail, but I think that essentially added more creatures to the game, 2 different types of creatures, with a few on a 3D model terrain stuff and things. I don't think it did much tweaking with the actual main characters other than one thing, which I can't think the name of it. But yeah, cool. So there we go, Nemesis. Really impressed. My first adventure into the realms of Awaken Realms games. It really cracking fun. It plays very well, plays quite fast. It's thematic. It's got that feel. It's one of those sort of storytelling games where at the end of the game, at the end of the night, you're having a chuckle, and it's kind of, you can have that water cooler moment of, oh, remember that time Bob went and did this and did that. And it is a game of just desserts. Pretty much, I think end result is most games are going to fall down as per usual, as these sort of horror games are, and these horror movies and all this sort of stuff, is that everyone is brought low by everyone trying to underhandedly save their own skin, which ultimately results in pretty much everyone else dying as well as them. So there we go. That is Nemesis. It's a firm, solid approval for me. If you're a fan of minis games, if you're a fan of Alien or Aliens, and you're looking for that sort of that feel of a miniatures-based version of that style of game, then yes, it's a cracker. It's really good fun. It isn't cheap. I appreciate that. But all the money there is to be seen on the table, and I think it's one that I personally want to play again more than once. It's definitely one that it's going to probably become a regular fixture on the gaming table. So there we go. Nemesis is recommended by us. It comes heartily recommended as another cool aliens-ish space carnage mayhem game. That's us for the moment. I will be obviously coming back soon with a Lifeform Nemesis comparison piece. Which one of the two is the better? But for the time being, Nemesis from Awaken Realms gets the, yes, this is very good. This is not a game over man situation. This is a cracking game. Really enjoyed it. Really good. Yes, lovely. Ta-ta.
Space is full of wonders, but also dangerous. That's why you should remember the following safety instructions. Rule number 1. Always wear your protective clothing, even if the atmosphere appears breathable. Do not remove your helmet. Alien life signs detected? Leave it to the professionals. Send out a distress call before it's too late. After returning to your ship, make sure to perform a full medical scan. In case of any contamination, immediately quarantine the affected personnel. If the contamination protocol is broken, do not act individually. Create a defensive perimeter, then calmly plan your next steps. Remember, your safety is our utmost priority.